My girlfriend lied about losing her job to keep my money coming in, so I exposed her fraud and watched her beg. When everything crashed down, I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I thought I'd finally met someone I could trust completely. After years of dating dead ends and people who seemed more interested in drama than partnership, Emma felt like a breath of fresh air. She was attentive without being clingy, ambitious without being arrogant, and somehow she had this way of making me feel like I was the only person who mattered in the room. My life was stable. I had a decent job in marketing, paid my own bills, and had a small emergency fund I was proud of. I wasn't rich, but I was careful with money and proud of being independent. I thought I knew how to spot manipulation. I was confident I'd finally found someone genuine. Emma slid into my life, so smoothly it almost felt like she'd always been there. She laughed at my terrible jokes, remembered the tiniest details I'd mentioned offhand, and even showed up with coffee on the days I had back-to-back meetings. Within a few months, it felt natural to spend weekends together, to share dinners, to imagine a future where we were a team. That's when she dropped the first bomb. I had no idea how pivotal it would be. "I lost my job last week," she said one evening, voice soft, almost hesitant. "It's been rough. I'm still figuring things out." I felt my chest tighten. She painted a picture of endless calls with recruiters, awkward interviews, bills piling up, and the stress of finding her footing in an unforgiving city. I listened, heart aching, feeling a mix of sympathy and protectiveness. "Hey, don't worry about rent this month. I've got you," I said before even thinking. It started small groceries, a few utility bills, but I told myself it was temporary. I believed in her. I transferred money without hesitation, and she smiled at me. The kind of smile that made you feel like you'd done the right thing in the world. At the time, I felt proud. Proud that I could support someone I cared about. Proud that my empathy was helping someone in need. I didn't notice the tiny flicker in her eyes, the calculation behind the gratitude. I didn't suspect that the trust I was offering so freely might soon be twisted against me. And yet, I felt this strange, comforting warmth. Like maybe, for once, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. At first, it was subtle. Emma would text me while I was at work, little complaints about bills or errands she couldn't manage. "Can you pick up my prescription today?" They wouldn't let me defer the copay. Or, "I forgot to top up the electricity, can you cover it?" I didn't think twice. I told myself it was normal. Everyone hits rough patches sometimes. But slowly, the requests started piling up, each one wrapped in a perfect little guilt trip. She never demanded, she asked in a way that made me feel like I'd be abandoning her if I said no. "You've always been so reliable," she said one night over dinner, leaning across the table, eyes wide. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I remember that line clearly. It made me feel needed, like I was important in a way I hadn't felt in years. And honestly, it felt good to be needed. I wanted to help. I told myself I wasn't being taken advantage of. Was being a good partner. But then came the little inconsistencies. One evening, I noticed she mentioned meeting a client for coffee, a client she had supposedly lost months ago. Another time, she casually referenced a work project that didn't exist. I questioned it quietly, almost afraid to say anything. When I did, she laughed it off, brushing my concerns aside. "You worry too much," she said, touching my arm like she was comforting a child. Her laughter was convincing, but a tiny knot of unease started forming in my stomach. Even friends began noticing odd things. "Are you sure she's unemployed? She always seems busy," one of them joked once. I smiled and waved it off. I couldn't admit to myself that the first seeds of doubt had taken root. Yet, every time I handed over another bill or transferred a few more dollars, she'd smile that same perfect, grateful smile. I told myself, it's temporary. She just needs a little help. I wanted to trust her so badly that I ignored the growing shadows creeping around the edges of our life together. But deep down, a tiny voice whispered, something doesn't add up. By the third month, the little requests had grown into full-blown financial obligations. It wasn't just groceries or utilities anymore. Esme asked me to cover her phone bill, car insurance, even an unexpected dental procedure. I remember staring at my bank account one morning, seeing the numbers dwindle faster than I ever expected and feeling a small pang of panic. But then she'd send one of those texts, "I don't know what I'd do without you." And the panic melted into this strange mix of guilt and pride. I wanted to help her, to be the person who could keep her afloat, who could be the rock she claimed I was. I began skipping lunches with friends and canceling weekend plans just to ensure I had enough left to cover her expenses. I started double-checking my schedule to make sure I could run errands or pay bills on time. Even when I felt drained, I'd tell myself, "It's fine. She's struggling. I'm here for her." I thought love meant sacrifice, that being a partner meant putting someone else's needs before your own. But slowly, I began to notice a tightening in my chest, this subtle, constant weight that I couldn't shake. There were moments when Emma's tone would shift. A slight sigh when I couldn't send money immediately. A soft, almost imperceptible edge to her voice when she reminded me of bills I'd already covered. But then she'd smile, charming and persuasive, and I'd forgive the tension immediately. "I'm just helping her through a rough patch," I'd repeat in my head like a mantra, ignoring the small voice that whispered, I might be losing myself in all this. One evening, I caught a glimpse of something Adima laughing on a video call with someone I didn't recognize. She quickly waved me off, saying it was just a friend, but the way she hit her screen made my stomach twist. Something felt off. I wanted to confront her, but I was afraid of being seen as paranoid. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, asking myself if I was being too cautious or if I was finally noticing the first real cracks in what I thought was a perfect relationship. And yet, I still trusted her. Even as the shadows of doubt began to stretch longer and darker, the first major shock came completely out of nowhere. I'd just gotten home from a long day at work when I noticed an email notification pop up on her laptop. Her name was on it. From some consulting firm? Curiosity got the better of me, and before I could stop myself, I hovered over the subject line. It was an offer letter. Not a maybe next month or a "we'll keep in touch." A signed, official, actual job offer. My heart sank. I felt frozen, staring at the screen, wondering how I could have been so blind. Later that evening, I tried to confront her casually. "Hey, this consulting firm. Didn't you say you were unemployed?" My voice was calm, but my stomach was in knots. She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "What?" "No, I didn't get an offer," she said, laughing nervously. "You must be imagining things." The way she smiled felt wrong, fake, like a mask stretched too tight over a cracked face. I couldn't shake it. Over the next few days, small details kept nagging at me. A new dress she hadn't mentioned buying. Dinner outings she claimed were free networking events, but clearly weren't. The more I paid attention, the more the puzzle pieces didn't fit. And every time I tried to ask her directly, she twisted it around on me. "Why are you being so controlling?" she'd say, voice trembling, but eyes sharp. "I can handle my own life, you know?" It was exhausting. I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, questioning my own judgment while simultaneously feeling a rising tide of anger I couldn't express. I wanted to believe she was honest, that maybe I'd misunderstood the email or her explanations. But the gut feeling wouldn't let me. Something was very wrong and I didn't know how deep it went. One night, sat on the couch, staring at the dim light of the city through the window, hands trembling slightly. How could I have been so naive? How did I miss all the signs? I felt my chest tighten, a mixture of dread, betrayal, and self-reproach. I didn't know it yet. But this was the moment everything was about to spiral, and there was no going back. After that night, I started noticing patterns I'd willfully ignored before. Every unexpected expense she asked me to cover now felt suspicious, and little inconsistencies in her stories began piling up like a mountain I couldn't ignore. I remembered the nights she said she couldn't pay her phone bill, only to see her scrolling on Instagram, posting pictures from some trendy cafe I didn't even know she visited. My chest tightened every time I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she had just a little cash saved. Maybe she borrowed it. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. I began keeping track, quietly, obsessively, of every request, every payment, every slip of her words. I was meticulous, jotting down notes, checking bank transfers, cross-referencing dates. The more I dug, the more the facade crumbled. She was living far beyond her supposed means, and none of it lined up with being unemployed. I even found receipts for dinners and shopping sprees she swore she'd split with friends. The betrayal stung sharper than anything I had ever felt. It wasn't just the money, it was the manipulation. The charm that had lulled me into blind trust. I kept replaying every conversation, every smile, every late-night text, wondering how I hadn't seen it sooner. And each time I questioned her, she would gaslight me with that same perfectly practiced calm. "Why are you doubting me? Don't you trust me?" Her words twisted my stomach into knots, making me feel guilty for even thinking she could be lying. One evening, I caught her sneaking a text from her phone, muttering something about paying it off before he notices. My hands shook as I tried to stay calm. I realized in that moment that she wasn't struggling, she was lying, deliberately, calculated, and I was her puppet. I went to bed that night staring at the ceiling, at heart hammering, mind racing. I felt like I was drowning in a mixture of anger, disbelief, and hurt. I couldn't shake the thought, how long has she been playing me? And I knew somehow the worst was yet to come. The midpoint twist hit me like a punch to the gut. I was going through her emails trying to make sense of the chaos in my head when I stumbled upon a folder labeled Invoices and Payments. My fingers hovered over the mouse, heart thudding. Hesitation flickered. Part of me didn't want to see it, didn't want to confirm what I already feared. But curiosity and rage won out. Inside, it was all there. Months of income she'd never told me about. Clients she'd been quietly consulting for while claiming she was jobless. She wasn't struggling, she was thriving. The realization washed over me like ice water, everything she'd said to tug at my heart. To make me hand over money was calculated. Every late-night sob story, every financial plea, every text dripping with faux desperation, it had been a con. I felt my hands go clammy, my stomach twisting in ways I didn't think were possible. How could I have missed it? How could someone I trusted, someone I loved, manipulate me so perfectly? My mind replayed the small details I'd brushed off, the unexplained dinners, the sudden shopping trips, her constant insistence that I was the only one who understood her. Every piece fit into place, forming a picture of deliberate deception I wasn't ready to accept. She wasn't just lying. She had weaponized my empathy against me. My chest burned with betrayal, anger, and shame. I thought I was helping someone I loved. I thought I was being a good partner. Instead, I'd been funding her lifestyle, feeding her con. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the city lights outside the window, trying to process it all. I felt hollow and furious all at once, like my trust had been stripped down to nothing. The betrayal was deeper than money. It was emotional, personal, and absolute. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what yet. My head spun with possibilities, none of them easy. And every scenario carried a risk. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized that from this point on, nothing between us would ever be the same. After discovering the truth, I couldn't just sit there anymore. I started digging deeper, piecing together months of her lies like some grim puzzle. Every bank statement, every email, every casual mention she'd made in passing suddenly carried weight. I saw the pattern clearly now. She'd built a meticulous web of deception, and I'd walked straight into it, blindfolded. The realization made my chest ache, not just from betrayal, but from the sheer scale of manipulation. I began tracking her movements quietly, almost obsessively. I didn't confront her yet. I needed to be sure. Every time she said she was meeting a friend or running an errand, I made mental notes. Every payment she requested, every new excuse, I cross-referenced with evidence I collected. It was like living in a shadow world. Always alert, always calculating. And the more I uncovered, the more furious I became, not just at her, but at myself for missing it for so long. One evening, I caught a glimpse of her laughing with someone on a video call, clearly showing off something expensive. She didn't notice me watching, and in that moment, I felt the full weight of her deceit. The anger and hurt boiled inside me, a strange mix of adrenaline and grief. I knew I was dealing with someone who had weaponized charm, smiles, and vulnerability to take advantage of me. And it was infuriating. I also started noticing how her manipulation extended beyond money. She had conditioned me to question myself constantly. If I hesitated or tried to probe, she'd guilt-trip me, making me feel like the villain for doubting her. Why am I even letting her do this? I thought repeatedly, but leaving now felt impossibly needed closure. I needed her to see that I wasn't naive anymore. By the end of the week, I had everything lined up: records, screenshots, bank statements, all the proof I needed. And yet, I waited. I wanted to confront her strategically, to make her understand just how deep this betrayal ran. Little did I know. The storm was about to hit, and she still had no idea I was ready. The confrontation was inevitable. I had spent days rehearsing in my head, imagining every possible reaction she could throw at me. I wanted to stay calm, to make sure the proof was undeniable, and to watch her facade crumble under the weight of her own lies. I remember sitting across from her at our tiny apartment kitchen table. A stack of printed emails, screenshots, and bank statements between us. The tension was so thick, I could hear the faint hum of the fridge over the pounding of my own heart. "Emma, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but low. She looked up, tilting her head, eyes cautious but curious. "What about?" she asked, pretending innocence so well it made my blood boil. I slid the first page across the table. "This," I said. "Explain this, please." Her eyes flicked down, and for the briefest second, the perfect mask faltered. I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered. Her voice was shaky, a stark contrast to the confident woman I thought I knew. I placed another printout in front of her, and another. Each page was a little hammer, each email and bank statement undeniable evidence of her deception. "Every time you told me you were struggling, you were lying," I said, keeping my tone controlled. "All these months, I've been supporting you while you were living comfortably, maybe even thriving." Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for a page, eyes wide with panic. "No, wait, I can explain." I cut her off, letting the silence stretch. The air in the kitchen felt heavy, almost suffocating, filled with the gravity of every lie she had told. She opened her mouth, then shut it, words failing her. I watched her for a long moment, the charming, confident woman I'd fallen for, reduced to fear and desperation. And in that silence I realized the truth. The person I loved was gone, replaced by someone who had taken advantage of my trust from day one. But the story wasn't over yet. That was the night I hit rock bottom. I watched Emma shrink under the weight of her own lies, and I felt a strange mix of relief, anger, and heartbreak. She was trembling now, voice cracking as she tried to justify herself. I didn't think you'd ever notice. You lied to me?" I interrupted, my voice firm despite the shaking in my chest. "Every single time you told me you were struggling, you were lying. Every payment, every sob story. It was a game. And I've been the one paying for it literally and emotionally." Her eyes filled with tears, and she flung herself into the chair opposite me, head in her hands. "Please, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just needed help." The words sounded hollow, like echoes from a different person. I wanted to scream, to hit something to make her feel a fraction of the betrayal I felt. But I didn't. Instead, I just sat there listening to the raw, desperate confession that should have been accompanied by remorse but wasn't. There was panic. Yes, but no real apology, no true understanding of what she had done. I could feel my chest tighten, my head spinning with exhaustion and rage. For months, I had bent myself over backward, giving my time, my energy, my money, and my trust. And now it was going to waste it on someone who had manipulated me from the start. She looked up, eyes wide and pleading. "I can fix this. I can pay you back." The words barely registered. I realized then that no amount of money could repair the betrayal. She had taken something deeper, something I couldn't reclaim. I felt hollow, yet strangely focused. I leaned back in my chair, hands gripping the edge of the table. For the first time, I wasn't just the victim in her story. I was preparing to regain control, and in that moment, I knew what I had to do next. But Emma had no idea that the reckoning was just beginning. I spent the next few days planning carefully, almost methodically. Every text, every bank record, every screenshot I had collected would serve a purpose. I wasn't going to act out of anger or spite. I wanted precision. Emma had underestimated me, assumed I'd crumble under betrayal. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction the day I decided to act. I called in a friend who had been quietly helping me make sense of the evidence. Together, we went through everything, double-checking details, ensuring the story would be undeniable when the time came. There would be no wiggle room, no excuses. Emma had weaponized trust. Now, it was my turn to reclaim it. That evening, I invited her over under the guise of a talk about the future. She came in, smiling, completely unaware of the storm waiting for her. I started calmly narrating the evidence I had collected. Screenshots, emails, bank statements all laid bare on the table. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I let the facts speak for themselves. Her confidence began to crumble almost immediately. She tried to interrupt, to gaslight, to spin some new tale, but the proof was relentless. Each page, each detail, stripped her further of the charm she had used to manipulate me for months. The apartment was thick with tension, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly deafening. I could feel my own heartbeat, steady and controlled, while she shifted uncomfortably, sweat beading on her forehead. Then came the moment I had waited for, the subtle flicker of fear in her eyes. The silent acknowledgement that she had finally lost control. "Please, please don't do this," she whispered, voice trembling, almost pleading. But I didn't need her to beg. I didn't need theatrics. I just let the truth sink in, watching as the empire of lies she'd built began to collapse under its own weight. And I realized something. Watching her scramble, desperate and powerless, felt satisfying. But the reckoning wasn't over yet. The aftermath hit her like a tidal wave. Almost immediately, the friends and acquaintances she'd leaned on, or flaunted her supposed struggles, too started asking questions. The truth spread quietly but decisively, like a ripple turning into a wave. Emma tried to spin it, tried to save face, but no one believed her anymore. Her calls went unanswered, her messages ignored. The social safety net she had relied on so heavily vanished overnight. I watched it all unfold with a strange mix of relief and lingering hurt. Part of me wanted to feel glee, the kind of satisfaction that comes from watching someone who betrayed you finally face consequences. But underneath that, there was exhaustion, emotional, mental, and physical. I had spent months investing in someone who didn't deserve it, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of my own trust, my own heart. She tried to reach out, of course. "I can make this right, I swear." She texted one morning, words dripping with desperation. But the person she was pleading to no longer existed. I had learned my lesson too well, and the empathy I once extended so freely was now carefully guarded. I didn't reply. I didn't even think about replying. I spent the next few weeks reclaiming my life. I revisited old hobbies I had ignored, reconnected with friends I'd distanced myself from, and slowly began to feel the weight lift from my chest. It wasn't instant healing, never is, but there was a sense of empowerment in taking back control. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone who had survived manipulation, who had faced deceit head-on and come out stronger. Sitting in my apartment one quiet evening, sipping a cup of tea, I reflected on the months of chaos. The anger had faded, replaced by clarity. I understood the full scope of what I had endured, and for the first time, I felt truly untethered from her lies. And in that moment, I realized something profound. Betrayal hurts. But it can also teach you your own strength. By the time part 12 rolled around in my life, the storm had fully passed, and I was finally standing on solid ground. Emma's lies had unraveled completely. She was left scrambling in a life of her own making, begging for the trust she had destroyed. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching her consequences unfold was enough. There was a quiet satisfaction in knowing that justice had a way of catching up. Even if it wasn't mine to mete out directly, I spent the days following in a sort of reflective silence. Piecing together what had happened and what it had taught me, I realized how much trust and empathy I had given freely and how dangerous that could be in the wrong hands. It wasn't about money or material loss anymore. It was about recognizing the value of boundaries and of self-respect. Every lie, every manipulation, every late-night plea for help had chipped away at my sense of security. But now I could rebuild it stronger than ever. I even smiled sometimes, thinking about the ridiculous charm she had wielded so effortlessly, now powerless. The city lights outside my window looked different, somehow sharper, more vibrant. I could finally breathe without that constant, subtle tension in my chest. I felt lighter. I felt free. And as much as the betrayal had hurt, I understood that it had also forced me to grow. I had learned to detect deception, to trust cautiously, and to prioritize my own well-being without guilt. That was a gift no one could take away, not even Emma. Sitting there with a warm cup of tea, I let out a long, quiet sigh. The lesson was clear. Empathy is a strength, but it must be paired with vigilance. Love is beautiful, but it should never come at the cost of your self-respect. I had survived. I had exposed her fraud, reclaimed my life, and learned a truth I would never forget, sometimes. The most powerful revenge isn't anger or drama, it's simply moving forward. Stronger and wiser than before, and for the first time in months, I felt at peace.